everyone. Thanks for taking the time of joining our webinar on sustainability. My name is Mélanie Damour, and I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives at XRPL Commons. So for those of you who don't already know what we are, XRPL Commons, we're a nonprofit based in Paris. Our mission is to create the conditions of success for entrepreneurs and developers who thrive in the XRPL ecosystem. Our initiatives are structured around 4 pillars: learn, build, adopt, and engage. Please check out our website to learn more about what we do and receive the latest updates. So at XRPL Commons, we're also committed to making the XRP ledger more sustainable. So since we've started this initiative, we've estimated the energy consumption and carbon footprint of the XRPL in partnership with CCRI, Crypto Carbon Ratings Institute, and the real-time findings are available on a dashboard on our website. We've also launched recently the Sustainability Members Club, the objective of which is to have a collaborative space around sustainability and also to highlight some of the key projects and initiatives that revolve around sustainability within the XRPL community. Also, our objective is to educate on climate change and decarbonization strategies. And in this purpose, we've hosted a couple webinars, which are all available for replay on our YouTube channel. Specifically for this webinar, we'll have Megan Edge from Ripple Impact present some key insights and highlights from New York City Climate Week. We'll also have CCRI, Crypto Carbon Ratings Institute, present main considerations regarding sustainability disclosure under MiCA for crypto asset service providers and token issuers. Finally, we'll have Simon Luling from Ekonavi present his startup. So we'll kick this off with Megan Edge from Ripple Impact. Thank you all for listening in today. Megan, do you want to start, if you can hear us correctly, by presenting some of the key insights from New York City Climate Week?
Yes, I can. And hello, I'm just confirming you can hear me. Yeah, perfect. Great. Well, hello. I am just back from the States after New York Climate Week, which was really a lot focused on voluntary carbon markets, but also scaling carbon markets more broadly. I would say the vibe going into New York Climate Week was very much focused on where's the demand going to be coming from in terms of who is scaling the voluntary carbon market. Is it still corporates? If so, what incentives or pieces of regulation are needed for them to start buying, as there has been a pretty massive demand slip so far in 2024. And it's made people wonder how much longer carbon markets that are voluntary can still sustain. I would say some key takeaways are that, one, you see a lot more governments, including right here in the UK. So I'm joining from London, where we've got just during New York Climate Week, we had a special climate envoy, Rachel Kite, formerly of ICVCM, Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets, step into this government-appointed position. And our UK Minister for Climate Change, Kerry McCarthy, is working on drafting some language and guidance on integrity in the voluntary carbon market, not so dissimilar from what we've seen out of the Biden administration earlier this year. So you do start to see, New York Climate Week started with a number of announcements on the government side that were in support of voluntary markets. Now, this isn't just, a push for national markets, which was also, I'll say, a theme coming out of Climate Week, but this is more on recognition that voluntary carbon markets are a successful financing mechanism to deploy into climate projects, are a good way of, driving that capital while, emissions reductions are still taking place. I would say another key piece of it, which was really interesting, storytelling is constantly part of the carbon market and part of climate work in general. And there was a couple of interesting takeaways there on storytelling, which is, in the last year to 18 months, you've seen the carbon markets divest from just avoided deforestation or conservation projects into more engineered and industrial removals. I would say actually the story piece that came out of New York Climate Week is still bringing it all right back to nature. So there was this idea of, okay, corporates and investors have a limited amount of funds to be able to deploy into carbon projects. What type of projects should they be deploying into? And this idea of natural tech came in, which is honestly just a different way of classifying types of removals. So like biochar, enhanced rock weathering, agricultural soil carbon, are now being bucketed under what is called nature tech. And it's a different way. I mean, our thinking constantly evolves. It's a different way, one, on the marketing side, to make people understand that all of this has to do with nature, but also in thinking that there's this very strong movement into continuing to finance natural capital, but through a lens of how can we also make it count towards allowances and regulatory pieces that will one day go into effect. So I'll pause there. The overall vibe coming out of it was strong, positive. I will say cautiously optimistic. There are at times where, you know, it very much feels like an echo chamber. And I think the acknowledgement of that was also strong, talking to a number of VCs and investors who have helped push the space and beef up the startup side of the climate tech market. I think there's some very real concerns around market cap and market valuation in a time where demand is slow. And so it's nice to see those being acknowledged, but at the same time, the room for progress is really how governments are stepping in and sending those demand signals that show that the voluntary carbon market will have some legitimacy in the next year and 18 months.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you for sharing these insights. If there are any questions, you can go ahead and ask them in the chat, and we can answer them either now or probably just after. And we'll kick off with CCRI, Crypto Carbon Ratings Institute. They'll present some key considerations around sustainability disclosure, and we'll also leave time for questions just for the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie, for having us. Are you sharing the slides or?
I can share them if you'd prefer, or otherwise you can go ahead.
Okay. No, it would be great if you could share the deck that we had sent. Thanks a lot for having us. My name is Christian Stoll. I co-founded CCRI together with Uli a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, building on research that we had previously conducted at TU Munich and MIT. So a pleasure to talk today about the implications of sustainability disclosure under the MiCA regulation. And yeah, I suggest we jump in directly with a quick view on the MiCA implementation timeline. As many of you probably know, the market and crypto asset regulation, MiCA, has been agreed and is currently being implemented in the EU. And this year, we already had our first major milestone mid-year with the go live of the requirements of Title 3 and Title 4, which are the requirements for electronic money token issuers such as stablecoins. And end of the year will be the major deadline for other token issuers as well as for crypto asset service providers to comply with the requirements. And from a sustainability disclosure angle, which is the focus of this presentation today, the MiCA provides us with 2 relevant articles. So on the next slide, you can see, Melanie, if you flip one down, thank you. You can see that the MiCA has 2 provisions in terms of sustainability disclosure, one targeting token issuers, so the Article 6, which implies that token issuers need to put in their MiCA white papers sustainability indicators. And the second one is Article 66.5, which is the relevant article for crypto asset service providers to make publicly available in a prominent place on their website those climate and environmental impact indicators for each and every crypto asset they provide services for. And what this means now in practice has been specified by the European Securities and Market Authority. And we've summarized the required indicators on the next page. Yes, exactly. So the European Securities and Market Authority, ESMA, has been mandated to develop the regulatory technical standard for the MiCA and proposed last year in the second consultation package 10 indicators from the areas of energy consumption, GHG emissions, waste production, and natural resource depletion. And 2 months ago, we've seen now the final draft RTS, which clustered those indicators further into mandatory and voluntary indicators. So we now know that the first 6 indicators will be required for disclosure, and there's an additional threshold of 500 megawatt hours annual network electricity consumption, which further limits the number of required indicators to just the first one. And if we take a closer look at these mandatory indicators on the next page, we also get from ESMA a definition how these indicators have to be interpreted. So for instance, energy consumption, the first one refers to the total amount of energy used expressed in kilowatt hours per calendar year for the validation of transactions and the maintenance of the integrity of the distributed ledger. So this is very specific, targeting not only the integrity, but also the transaction activity. And similar definitions are provided for the other indicators, which sometimes the definition deviates a bit from what you expect. So for instance, energy intensity refers to the amount of energy used to validate a single transaction, which you wouldn't see from the description of the indicator itself. So we have very detailed descriptions how or what to report on those mandatory MiCA indicators. There are also requirements how to present these indicators, and on the next page you can see a template that ESMA also provided for crypto asset service providers, how to display the data on the website. And there's a specific table as contained in the RTS, which has several fields that exactly specify things like the name of the entity or the entity identifier of the CASP, as well as the respective indicator values and fields for methodology descriptions. So to be very transparent how the respective indicators have been calculated. On the next page, you can see now a bit the challenge of this process. So our understanding is that in theory, the idea of the regulator was the token issuers would publish MiCA white papers, which will then be collected in a repository. And that's something that also the European Commission is working on, to put together a repository to host all these white papers. And CASPs could then simply scrape these repositories and extract the sustainability indicators for their individual reporting obligations. So to put the data into this website table that I just showed on the previous page. In reality, however, this process has certain challenges, as summarized on the next slide. And the key challenge is that there will be gaps in the data. So for many token issuers, they might not exist. So best example, or might be unknown, as the case with Bitcoin. Also, there might be several stakeholders involved, so foundations, technical development teams. So that's not really clear who is actually the issuer. And then third, you also have certain organizations that already announced publicly to not comply with MiCA, such as Tether. And as a consequence, you won't have the respective white papers where you can obtain the data. And that's really something that will be interesting to see over the next coming months, how these data gaps will unfold. And one option to close such data gaps and what we've observed, we'll come to that in a second. Maybe on the next slide, just to quickly highlight how the approaches of the issuers deviate. So on the one side, as mentioned, we've seen public statements from Tether to not comply with MiCA. On the other hand, we've seen stablecoin issuers that have actively pushed towards obtaining approvals as early as possible, such as Circle. So this is really something that will be interesting to explore in the coming months, how regulatory compliance becomes a competing edge over non-compliant players, and how the entire market will develop now that the hurdle to enter is higher. As already just briefly mentioned, there are also alternative ways to overcome this data challenge, which you can see on the next slide. So given this complexity of who is the token issuer, or if there's no issuer, how can the entire ecosystem actually access data? And several entities such as XRPL Commons or the Solana Foundation have launched respective dashboards to provide MiCA indicators and sustainability data to the ecosystem, so to support anyone who's building on top of it, to reduce the regulatory hurdle of using the respective networks. And that's something, I guess, that will also be subject of future communication by the XRPL Commons team. So we're proud to support we're proud to support this network assessment over the past months. And if you have any questions regarding MiCA sustainability disclosure, please feel free to reach out to us. Back to you, Melanie, and thanks again for having us.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you for sharing all of these insights. I see there are a couple people connected. If there are any questions, we have a couple minutes now to address them. You can put them directly in the chat. Oh, I see someone is raising their hand. I'll allow to talk.
Hello, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was wondering, how do you go about the specific process of the carbon accounting within the actual data collection and reporting?
Happy to explain. So carbon emissions of the network are a result of the energy consumption of the respective nodes. So what we do, we assess single nodes, assess how much electricity they consume depending on the hardware used. So we have a representative hardware set in a temperature controlled room where we measure energy consumption of single nodes to come up with an average node in the network. And we also monitor transaction throughput, for instance, which is another driver of energy consumption of a single node. And then we continuously monitor the number of nodes active in the network to multiply the energy consumption of a single node to come up with an energy footprint of the network. And then we look at locations, so where the nodes are located globally. We look at the energy systems that provide power to those nodes and can then translate the energy consumption to carbon emissions with a location-based carbon accounting approach to come up with the network carbon footprint.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a co-founder of a carbon accounting startup, Carbon Sustain, with my co-founder Paul here. And so, yeah, I was just really curious about the details. So I'd love to discuss more offline how you go through the process, if possible.
So we follow a location-based approach in line with GHG protocol standards, and happy to discuss offline further.
Yeah, thank you. Could you send me your email, or?
You can just send it this hi@carbonratings.com. So this will, and then I'll respond to it.
Thank you for that question, and thank you, Christian, for answering. Do we have any other questions? You can either put them directly in the chat or raise your hand virtually. Great. We'll still keep some time at the end of the webinar if you have any other questions or thoughts. So I'll give the floor to Simon to present his project, Ekonavi.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Little echo there. Nice to be here. I hope you're all well. I apologize first. I came down with a cold, so I'm sorry if it sounds like I am mumbling a bit, but thank you for your presence and bearing with me. I suppose I'll share the screen. Okay, now I have the possibility to. And here we go. So beyond just presenting our project and giving an update on what we're doing, for those of you that know us, I thought it would be most interesting if we could put it in the context of the discussion today. So the topics of regulations has been raised, and also incentives around decarbonization. So for example, we just had the presentation from Christian on MiCA, which are regulations pertaining to the EU. Us in Ekonavi, we are based in Brazil. Our entire activity is basically in Brazil and Latin America, so we are subject to different regulations. And so thus arise some questions of like, how can we work across geographies? Also on the issue of incentives for carbon offsetting, since we are in the position of basically being representing the offsetter agents, if you will. How can we make something work both in the interests of the ones who want to offset and the ones that are actually fulfilling it? So first, for those of you that are seeing us for the first time, a little intro. Ekonavi is a platform that maps and supports agroforestry projects, mainly in Brazil, also a bit in neighboring countries in South America. A few months after founding, we entered the Web3 space, and we focused our activities on field reporting and insights, good practices with land regeneration. So like one early example, but that I think is interesting to share, with early partners in the Web3 space, Regen Network and IXO, which are both dedicated to environmental and social impact. We have been running proof of stake validators, and where people would stake their coin, and the commission that we would earn would go back to the field. So dare I say it's an early or proto iteration of linking financial activity to states of nature and activity therein. And since our launch, so nearly 4 years ago, we've onboarded almost 750 field projects. We've undertaken over 50 activities of planting and educational workshops throughout Brazil, and teaching people in rural communities how to open Web3 wallets and leverage tools to open new sources of revenue and activity. And we've also, so relevant for this discussion, produced now 12 field reports. And before we continue, I want to give a quick definition of agroforestry. So it's a land management approach combining agriculture and forestry. So not only are you producing food and wood, you're also restoring ecosystems, so improving the quality of the soil, bringing back biodiversity, and so on, and strengthening climate all together. And it's also important to point out that, at least in the Brazilian context, the vast majority of agroforestry projects are started on degraded land and dry lands, which is to say that the impact generated brings accrued value over time. And it's something that I want you to think about as we move forward, and this notion, let's say, of added value. Now, so in the framework of the discussion, in more recent times, we've been starting to adopt an approach called ISSB. So it's ISSB backed methodology. ISSB means it's the International Sustainability Standards Board. It is produced by the UK nonprofit IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, which is basically a group that undertakes the guidelines for companies to make decisions on investments, and for the assessment of a set of data or an asset. It is recognized by the governments of Brazil, Costa Rica, Nigeria, Sri Lanka, and Turkey. So therefore, it is relevant in our jurisdiction. It has also been given positive feedback from the government of the UK, though they haven't officially implemented it. So in this sense, in August 2024, we onboarded 8 impact reports produced by Ekonavi field projects throughout Brazil. with the support of Arbitrum 1, which is a chain on a EVM. And so I guess one of the questions now relevant as we move across countries and geographies is, what is this data worth if only recognized in Brazil's jurisdiction? Could it be relevant to a company in a different party's portfolio? So this is something I think we can all think about. Now, furthermore, in the context of Brazil, there is a lot going on, I guess, rather favorably in terms of technology use, tokenization, whatnot. So we are imminently going to see the launch of the DREX. So it's a system that would be governing the digital real, which will be Brazil's CBDC. It is being built on the Hyperledger Bezu, which is also on EVM. And I guess it's been undergoing some pilots, though it hasn't been fully launched. There has been some delays. But in this sense, arguably, the timing, it matches, interestingly, that of the XRPL EVM sidechain. So right now, Drex is scheduled to launch maybe Q1 of 2025. They might be able to basically be in sync, and we hope to work on this bridge. And then another interesting point, at the end of last year, Brazil announced that they're going to emit $2 billion worth of GSS plus bonds. That's green, social, sustainable bonds in the framework of the Climate Bond Initiative. It's the 50th country to do so, and they will emit it as projects and proposals come along. So the next thing I'd like to show you, I hope it plays, and if it does not, c'est la vie, as they say where I am. I guess not, but basically I want to share with everything I was previously explaining, that we developed a solution, that we're presenting to the Brazilian Central Bank, basically a UI-friendly system that enables both investors to mint tokens for funding impact activities, and allows farmers to upload their impact data, which you would have seen if I was able to play this. Maybe I'll try and share it at the end of the presentation. And but so like one thing that we're hoping to do with our impact reports that are ISSB backed, that ultimately this can be how do you say, transferred and to hold the GSS plus bonds that the government emits. So a company anywhere can at least hold something that is sovereign. Now, when getting back to XRPL, what's really interesting for a project like ours is that it's efficient. It's doesn't have a big carbon footprint, so it stands with our principles. And then there's the aspect of scalability for a project like ours with hundreds of projects spread out in Brazil, where we ultimately expect many transactions to happen on a regular basis. This would make for smooth deployments. It has a diverse and dynamic ecosystem. This is something that I really appreciated when I attended Apex last year. There's many projects in this ecosystem, companies, nonprofits that are using the technology for different ends and purposes, but where there's lots of compatibilities. And dare I say, in the not too long term, I hope that Ekonavi can be the go-to contractor, let's say, for impact in Brazil for any company, wherever they are in the world, but that revolving around the XRPL and its use cases. And so, which is also what can be said about that the XRPL is open for impact throughout the world, whether it is in Brazil. So, for example, we saw that they've launched a grant program dedicated to there. In Africa, there's an initiative with a group called On Afrique, so for deployments over there. And So then I'll close off with some, I guess, open questions to, wondering what meets XRPL standards for decarbonization action. This will be relevant for a project like ours and others that are undertaking this work. And then one other thing, can the world see beyond carbon in and of itself? Because I would argue that it is ultimately a means to an end. And if you look at the photo on this slide on the right, this is a farm, an area that was transformed in just 3 years. It's a member of Econavi in Bahia, going from simple and barren land to a biodiverse, abundant forest. This can be translated in terms of carbon capture, but this is what it means in concrete terms. There's something for storytelling for you. Do we want to try and play this little demo? And how should I proceed for this? To open the link, one moment. And it is a little. Je suis sorti de ça? So anyway, yeah, as you see here, it basically shows the various facets, but one that can be accessible to anyone who is not necessarily a programmer. So yeah, most of the people involved in impact, whether in the field or investing in it. And we are presenting this to the Brazilian Central Bank. Hopefully we get their support and then move forward with favorable policies with regard to Web3 over there, and bring the XRPL to its full potential in Brazil.
Thanks, Simon. Thank you so much for that presentation. I can see that there's a question. I'll just give you the floor. Give me.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Oh, I think you can do it.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
yeah, so I've heard you. We've talked with Paul, our CEO from Carbon System as well. And I was also wondering, are you developing any APIs in order to buy the carbon credits?
Apologize, we had a little echo. We are not specifically building this ourselves, and it's something that we've been speaking with some groups, and happy to keep the conversations open, because we, as I briefly mentioned before, it's not, carbon itself is not our central focus, but because of its relevance in the markets today, it's something that we're not discounting at all. And so yeah, also happy to speak more about that.
Yeah, let's talk more offline as well. And we're already integrating some afforestation projects that are also in Brazil too. So even if it's not carbon credits, if there's any other kind of integration, we'd be happy to work together.
Thank you for that question. Are there any thoughts or other questions? Sure. Go ahead, Simon.
Also, just for those of you that might be interested, as I was preparing this talk, I had found an interesting resource that explains the Drex, so the digital real and its platform in more detail, and written in a, dare I say, pleasant, not too tech dense way. And I'll share the link here in the webinar chat. It's a part 1 and part 2, and makes for a nice little read before going to bed.
Great. So that's pretty much it on our side for the agenda we had today. There's still a bit more time if you have any questions or thoughts that you want to share, either through the Q&A function or just by raising your hand. Thank you for those who took the time to connect today, to listen in and also share some thoughts. Many thanks as well to Megan Edge, Simon and Christian, as well as Uli from CCRI. Just to give you an overview of what we're doing at XRPL Commons in terms of sustainability. So our plan is by the end of the year, just another webinar where we'll also want to highlight some more community projects and members. So if you're currently working on a sustainability project and would like to share what you're working on, please submit your proposal either directly or through our website. We'll also, during the next webinar, present our decarbonization strategy regarding the XRPL. So just a reminder, the past year was dedicated to assessing the electricity consumption and carbon footprint of the XRP ledger. And by the end of the year, we'll aim to decarbonize our footprints through avoid, reduce, remove, and through offsetting as well. So in the same thoughts, if you have a solution or any proposals to go through this decarbonization and offsetting initiative for the XRP ledger, please get in touch with us directly or through our website. By directly, we're based in Paris, and we're also animating and hosting a lot of events around the world. So you can definitely find us at those, and the list of events that we're hosting is also on our website. Thank you again for connecting, everyone. Thanks, Megan, Christian, and Uli, and Simon for your presentations. And we'll share soon the next date for the upcoming webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a nice day.